Then I'm going to come back up here I'm going to ask you to stand. Will you join me, sir? Stand up. That way I won't fall down as I try to reach you. Next question turns on Social Security. And Scott Bradley, you will have the first opportunity to respond.
Social Security has been a safety net for millions of Americans for more than 75 years. Personally, it helped me finish college. After my father died, it supported my mother and my brother and my sister, and now it's helping me in retirement. What would you do as a senator to ensure that future generations receive the full benefits they have earned? Or would you recommend that Social Security be cut to reduce the deficit it didn't cause?
Mr. Bradley, your first opportunity.
As I said at the beginning of the program, the national government has no power whatsoever to redistribute wealth. End of discussion in terms of that. It doesn't show it all in the Constitution. Social Security was foisted upon the nation back in the 1930s. It has been something that has pillaged and plundered most Americans of their savings and their ability to live on their own 2 feet as they go forward in this land. Social Security is running at the end of its course. This year, they've had to take $29 billion out of the general fund in order to fund the revenue requirement for Social Security. We are on a death spiral with Social Security. Social Security will not be sustainable at the rate that it has been. We must do something different. In moments that are left, I would like to say the first thing that should happen is Social Security should be made voluntary for people such as yourself that are in that condition, that have been pillaged and plundered so you have nothing left to go. And we will then begin to allow other Americans, the younger Americans, to choose to follow a plan of their own that will allow them to invest for their future. That will allow employers as well as individuals to invest their own money that they're now putting into a Social Security plan that will fail within a few years. It will fail. There is no way around it unless we raise the age of retirement until about 82, which would mean it would be about time for people to die. So Americans need to realize that a voluntary Social Security program, keeping those on it that are in the program now until the end of their lives, would be the approach that I would take. There's far greater answer than this, but you'll have to look at my website.
Mr. Granato, your opportunity to speak to the topic of Social Security.
Social Security is a lifeline for so many people in this country. We have $334 million that comes into our state alone per month through Social Security. 38% of the people receiving it here would be on poverty if they did not have that coming in. It's funny, I don't know if you're saying it should be raised to 82. I know Mike Lee says it needs to be raised to 75. Take it away from the federal government, let the state run it. We see how well the state's done with so many other things. The federal government needs to continue this program. People are in need, and it's the right thing to do.
I would afford rebuttal, but it's actually response time, Mr. Lee.
The first thing we have to do with Social Security is promise right here and right now that those people who are already retired, who are current beneficiaries of Social Security, will not have any change made to their benefits. They've retired in reliance on those benefits, and it would be immoral and it would be impracticable for us to take those benefits away now that they're retired. At the same time, it's also imperative on us that we look at realities that we're facing, with the fact that the demise of Social Security as we know it has already been forecast by economists. These are raw mathematical numbers that we can't continue to ignore. In order to preserve what benefits are there to be gathered from them, we need to start making adjustments right now, forecasting to people of my generation, again, not those who are already retired, whose benefits will not change, but people of my generation, so that they can plan ahead. We need to start acknowledging the fact that we will have to make some adjustments, including making sure that Social Security benefits escalate no faster than inflation. No more cost of living inflation in the long run. We need to escalate those based on inflation rather than cost of living. We also are going to need to raise the retirement age. When we created the program back in the 1930s, most Americans lived only into their early 60s. They're now living into their late 70s and early 80s, with people spending longer and longer portions of their lives on this program, and that's a good thing. But we need to understand the fact that, especially at a time when we have fewer workers who will be paying into the system, when we have the most workers who will be retiring and on those benefits, we've got to make some difficult choices, and that won't always be pleasant.
A couple of questions on the military to wrap up our conversation this evening. Perhaps military is not the best way to say it. Foreign policy. One of the Facebook questions that I received from a veteran asked not to use his name, but identified himself as a staff sergeant who had just rotated back to the United States after his third tour of duty in Afghanistan. And he told me, Ken, I have my strongly held opinion, but I want to know what the candidates strongly feel about the proper role of the United States in Afghanistan. Not ambiguous, specific. Tell me where you stand. And that was the words from this staff sergeant. So, gentlemen, I feel it's my responsibility to this veteran to ask you to answer his question. Mr. Granato, please go first.
Right up front, I don't feel that we belong in Afghanistan, but we're there. President Obama didn't start the war, but I feel it's his to finish. I take him at his word when he wanted to ramp up the troops to 30,000 more so they could get in and get the job done. Again, we need to keep our men and women in uniform safe. We need to bring them home strong, and the sooner we get out, the better we'll all be.
Mike Lee, your opportunity to respond to this veteran who has answered the call.
Any and every time we deploy our young men and women in uniform into harm's way, including in Afghanistan, we need to send them there with the promise that they're there to do a job for us that we can't do for ourselves. They're there to protect American lives. We need to keep them there for as long as it takes for them to do that job, to eliminate threats to our national security here at home, and neutralize that threat, and then give them the promise that we'll bring them home promptly when that job is done. Now, in Afghanistan, we currently have something close to 100,000 troops on the ground. In time, and then in the coming months, it's my hope that we can reduce that number somewhat, and we can bring it down closer to 20 or 30,000 as that number stood before this president took office. When we do that, we should focus the troops' attention, I believe, more on counterterrorism activities. If we send in a lot of special operations forces, focus them specifically on taking out terrorist cells in Afghanistan, I think we'll be better equipped to do that. But we have to make sure that al-Qaeda strongholds don't develop in Afghanistan as they easily could, as they started to a few years ago when we went into that country. Those are entities that could present a clear and present threat to our national security, and we've got to take care of those. We've got to eliminate them, make sure that they don't have a place to grow and prosper there.
Scott Bradley, your opportunity to speak to the issue of Afghanistan.
I held the rank of staff sergeant almost 40 years ago, so I can perhaps identify with this individual. We went into Afghanistan ostensibly to eliminate a terrorist named Osama bin Laden and his cronies in al-Qaeda. Somehow he slipped through the net. Now we're there fighting Taliban. Oh, wait a minute. They've decided they're going to nation build and they're going to build a new democracy there. Oh, wait a minute. There's some new minerals we've just discovered. No, the Soviets did before. And now we've got to not withdraw so we don't leave a kind of a vacuum there for Red China to fill. This is mission creep in its worst sense. Americans need to understand that we cannot be the police force of the world. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 allows the United States Congress not only to declare war, but to grant letters of marque and reprisal. If in fact we had one target, Osama bin Laden, we could have sent an insertion team in there and solved the problem at 300 meters with a 155 grain Spitzer bow tail. That's a bullet. One guy, one stop. And so America needs to understand that we do not need to deploy our military forces. This is not anything in any way, shape, or form that reflects negatively upon our troops. They have done their jobs honorably, nobly. They're brave and true and strong. The problem is with the policymakers at the head of this government. This country needs to return to a deliberative process by which we engage our troops overseas. Thereby, we will honor the troops. Afghanistan, we should not be there. We need to make a strategic withdrawal with the safety of the troops foremost in mind.